Hello and welcome to this little Spalluccipedia video. I'll be having a little chat about something which is very central to the universe of the books which I write. There's something which crops up a lot, and that is the notion of this thing called the divergence. The divergence basically is an act which is committed by an individual, which stops heaven and earth from combining. There is this notion that there should have been a convergence, which was the true path, the original path, that heaven and earth will combine, would all live happily ever after. But somebody, for some reason, has come along and said, I don't want that to happen, and has prevented it from happening, and as a result heaven and earth diverged, and we have the divergence. The character who's mainly associated with divergence throughout the books is Kano, this hooded chap who comes along and plagues Sam Spallucci on a regular basis, and is, the commander-in-chief of all the constructs who have been sent back through time to hunt down children of Cain, and uses them as his army after the divergence, during the divergent lands, alongside the Shadow Wraiths and the Fallen, who are mentioned in the Bobby Normal books, which are set post-divergence. But it is not specifically said that Kano is the cause of the divergence. He acts as if he is, but things can change. It might not be quite as clear-cut. So that's what it is. It is this thing which is basically going to prevent paradise. But how did it come about? I've always had this notion when I've been writing of sort of like a post-apocalyptic land. A land where something has happened and humanity has been decimated. When I was a teenager, I started work on the Divergent land stories based around this character called Claw, the vampire hunter. And humanity had been reduced to this remnant. But there were vampires out there, good vampires. Well, one, Claw, because he was the last of his kind, who were trying to police things, trying to put things right. He was hunting down what were then called wraiths, who then sort of become constructs and shadow wraiths. And there's this big bad out there called Kano. And we were going to have this big sort of like standoff at the end between Claw and Kano. Not saying too much there because there's serious spoilers. So we'll just backtrack slightly and say, and that's how it sort of sat. I had this notion as a teenager to do that, but I never really worked with it. Then Sam came along, and I started writing modern day stories. No mention of divergence whatsoever in the first outings for Sam, sort of like my teenage years, my early 20s. At the time I was writing this, I was writing and rewriting Fallen Angel. And then in my 30s, I rewrote Fallen Angel again. I went, this post-apocalyptic thing, this fits in nicely with this, because we've got the whole idea of heaven and earth combining in Fallen Angel. What if something stopped that? And that's when the idea of the divergence proper came into being. Now, as it was, in this draft of Fallen Angel, Sam appeared for the first time. So as a result, the divergence is going to be in Sam's universe, and everything started to click, and it's a case of, yeah, I can see where we're going now. I can see how this whole universe works, and it all hinges on this one moment when this one person stands up and says, I know what you want is good for humanity. I know what you want is the right thing to do, but I don't want it. For whatever reason. And so the divergence happens. We have hints about it. Like I say, Kano is obviously very much involved. We know that it is a time when humanity has been reduced as remnant. We know that there are constructs everywhere. You know, in the Sam books, we have a few crop up here and there, normally looking like other humans. You occasionally get some pop up in the full form, as in Dark Justice. But Divergent lands, they are everywhere. You know, you see them walking around the landscape. We have a scene in Bobby Norman and the Eternal Talisman where you have the construct in its true form walk into the village, and everyone is just terrified just by this one creature. You know, that is how much power they have, just as these sort of like these clay soldiers. We know that Kanor is reigning supreme. We know that some humans throw their lot in with him. In the Bobby Normal books again, you have this character Teller, who is sort of like the antagonist in Bobby Normal Eternal Talisman. We know that his father's thrown his lot in with the Shadow Wraiths, who are like the uber constructs, the ones who are ruling things on the day-to-day basis. And there's Shadow Wraiths themselves. And then above them, there are references to two characters who are known only as the Fallen. They're only mentioned in passing in Bobby Normal Eternal Talisman. But we do get to meet them in the short story, The Virtuous Man. Again, I don't want to give too much away because slight spoilers there, you know, but there are a couple of characters we have come up against in the Sam Spalluccipedia universe who have ended up on the side of Kanor in this like post-apocalyptic landscape. So yeah, not a pleasant place at all. Not somewhere you want to live, but certainly a good place you can write stories. So, like I've mentioned before, we've got the Sam Spalluccipedia books coming, then everything sort of kicks off in Fallen Angel, and the Divergence happens, and then we have the trilogy set after that, Divergent lands, Cut, Blade, and Dragon, the three stories. And we'll have to wait and see what happens there. That'll be a good story getting there. Looking forward to it.